Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel. I declare the meeting open at 1:11 p.m. and acknowledge we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respect to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters, and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders and the DAP Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website. By being present at this meeting, attendees consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be live streamed to the public. Recordings are also made available on the DAP website and YouTube page. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce the members that are participating today. My name is Dale Page. I'm the presiding member today. I have all the other members in the room with me. To my right, I have Clayton Hine, Deputy Presiding Member, and Peter Lee, Specialist Member. And to my left, I have Councillor Andrew White and Councillor Cliff Collinson from the town of East Fremantle. Item 2 on the agenda, apologies, there are nil today. Item 3, noting of minutes. Minutes of all previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Moving to part B of our agenda, the town of East Fremantle. Item 1 is declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation contained in part B of the agenda and the part B related information, and that includes the response that was received to the Reg 13 request for further information. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that members have considered all the information? Thank you. Item 2, disclosures of interest. As a formality, could I check with our local government DAP members whether this application has been before you at a briefing or a council meeting?
No.
No? All right. No other disclosures have been received to this point. Do any members wish to make any declarations of interest in relation to this item? No? Excellent. Moving on to item 3 then, the Form 1 DAP application we're considering today. Lot 418, number 91, and Lot 419, number 93, Canning Highway. Lot 81, number 70, St. Peters Road, and Lot 423, King Street, East Fremantle. 9 group dwellings, DAP number 26/03098. We have 4 presenters on this item today. Pippa McIntosh, who will be speaking against the application, Philip Ganesh from Build Form Projects in support, Andrew Baranowski, Pam E in support, and Sean van Poel from RAD Architecture in support. We also have a written deputation that we received from Ken Perry. He was not able to be with us today, but we have received and read the information he has provided. Presenters, I remind you, in accordance with our DAP standing orders, your presentations are limited to 3 minutes. We have read all the information that you have provided us, so I encourage you to stick to the most salient points you wish to get across in those 3 minutes. When you get to your 3 minutes, I'll call you to time, and then the panel members will be able to ask questions of you. Pippa, do you want to come forward? And your 3 minutes starts when you're ready.
I come to this meeting as a property owner living very close to this proposal, not in my capacity as a member of the Heritage Council of Western Australia, and I thank the town of East Fremantle for their detailed and thoughtful response to this proposal. The Heritage Council advice in relation to this matter was provided under delegation to DPLH, as this place doesn't meet the thresholds of state heritage significance. It's category C because it's a fantastic example of a Federation bungalow. But just because this place is not registered with the state does not mean it is of no significance. The East Fremantle Football Club's submission to the DAP on this matter clearly details its historic connection to this residence, and the fact that this knowledge has only been documented recently after prior approvals for this development have taken place should not preclude it from consideration now at this meeting, in this forum. This house is a part of the Plympton ward and a celebrated heritage area, and this residence has the potential to showcase just what makes Plympton so desirable given its location at a very busy intersection of Canning and Stirling highways. I'd like to respectfully remind the panel members of the relevant objectives of State Planning Policy 3.5, and that is to conserve places and areas of historic heritage significance and to ensure that the development does not adversely affect the significance of heritage places and areas, and keeping this little house would be aligned with that policy. The integration of the facade and key interior elements of this building and any future development as a part of stage 2 would clearly align with those objectives, and especially if the home's facade was potentially incorporated into a foyer of an apartment building or turned into a cafe or a waiting area that outlines this historical connection. The story of the club's history at the house could be celebrated and visually represented and be a great project for the club to connect with the developer on. I quote from the East Fremantle Football Club submission: "The facade of the house could provide a point of difference for future apartment owners, connecting new residents to our historic local club and the East Fremantle community more broadly. We would encourage those living in apartments to appreciate the unique heritage architecture of the Plympton ward, join our club, celebrate our local traditions, connect with our member base, and enjoy the fantastic new facilities at Good Grocer Park." Isn't that a fantastic idea? And, you know, even people living in apartments want to feel connected to the community and want to be a part of the local heritage. Maintaining the facade and entry of this little house will achieve just that. And we have a local club that is engaged and willing on this matter. I therefore request that the DAP please ensures that this Federation bungalow at lot 432 93 Canning Highway, East Fremantle, is not demolished as a part of stage 1 of this development, but instead kept and used as a unique value proposition to connect future residents to the East Fremantle community as a part of stage 2.
Thank you very much. Panel members, any questions of this presenter? I'll start with the elected members.
Not for me.
Not for me.
I have a question. So looking at some of the information that has come through in the report, it appears that part of this building might actually fall within the area that is set aside for road widening. Given that, and other than the objectives that you stated now in your deputation, on what statutory planning basis do you feel this panel could reasonably, and I use that word reasonably because we need to be reasonable, compel the owner to retain the part of the building, or refuse the application on the basis that it's not being retained?
I can't, right? I'm just hoping you actually see that, you know, the fact that the club has not articulated this connection earlier. I think they would have been able to articulate that at the time before some rezoning was done. So I don't actually have, you know, and I really hope I'm just throwing everything at this. I just really want to try and keep this little house. And to I don't know who the developer is, but I'm sure you're in the room. People want to know about this house. You know, a development. This is actually an opportunity to actually showcase what good heritage, new and you know what's possible in terms of the integration of heritage into a new building.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to get the applicant team to come forward together. And what I propose is you'll each get your 3 minutes, but I'm going to hold questions so we can ask the team collectively the questions at the end. Philip, I believe you are first, right? And your 3 minutes can start when you're ready.
Very important here. I feel very important here, Dan.
Okay, I think I'll start with 3 minutes started, obviously, but I mean, for 9 terraces, this was a very comprehensive development application, probably more pages than I've seen with any other project for 9 terrace houses. I just got to remind everyone, this is stage 1 of a 2-stage development. Stage 1 is the 9 terraces, where although we're open discussion, because this is a new blank canvas for us, we're open discussion with the terrace houses. It is in stage 2. There is discussions with Main Roads about the road widening, which takes out the veranda. This was all this was all old news because we had an SDA approval over the project. So the history of the project is, I've been working on it for 10 years, so 6 years was a scheme amendment. So the scheme amendment was quite a detailed process that went through a lot of iterations and took 6 years. But that spelled out the very clear guidelines for this site. The SDA approval actually expired in May this year. That was for 92 apartments, 1,200 square metres of commercial, 19-storey building. It was obviously a much denser project in one stage with multiple levels of basement. That maintained the POS contribution, which is the scheme amendment number 14, which is all spelled out in there. So that was approved at SDAU. That went through about a 15-month SDAU approval process. And then we finished that process, and we're quite happy with the design. The outcome was a contemporary design by Michael Petroni. And then we get to the economics of it, where at the point of doing a scheme amendment and a very long SDAU process, the economics of the project, where builders were going administration, construction costs increased by 50%. So we sat down and had a rethink about the project and decided to take the view. It took quite a long time because we had to try and get the right pricing, but we took the view that less is more. So we're talking about a much less dense project. So stage 1 is 9 terraces. Stage 2 will be somewhere in the vicinity of 30 to 40 apartments. We've got some mass in there with the public open space, which is open to the public. And it's a less dense project, which, given where we've come from, should be more palatable to the community. So what we put forward, especially with the terraces, is we believe is a fully compliant part of the building envelope and part of the scheme M14 to St. Peter's Road. So the whole intent of the whole building envelope there was not to shadow the properties across the road on St. Peter's. So this doesn't do that. The scheme does talk about elements like plant equipment, sun shading elements, and architecture elements that can pop through the building envelope. Sean will talk about, from an architect's point of view, we'll talk about how we can address this. We don't want it to
You
get...
are at your 3 minutes, so I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't want to get bogged down in the detail or grey areas in the scheme amendment because it's just wording. So Sean will cover that off. Within the RAR conditions, there's 54 of them. We only propose to amend 10 conditions. And then the last bit, which is probably important, is the report by Malcolm Mackay. So we were told there's no design review process with the town of East Fremantle. All of a sudden, a report popped up. We got told we couldn't submit until an independent expert had a look at the scheme, did a report. So that happened, but that report was done on the basis of there were no official submission of documentation, and we didn't have any right to present to the. So although I highly regard, I've known him for a long time, Malcolm, I highly regard his knowledge and his experience and his point of view. I don't think that document should take much weight in this forum.
I'm asking to close it.
I'm closed.
Thank you. All right, Andrew Baranowski, your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are we able to put the slides on the screen, please? So I mean, again, I guess our role in the project is very much a landscape role, and how we can integrate this building into the streetscape. And I guess having a close look at this particular precinct, I guess from a landscape point of view, what we were trying to achieve is I guess a modern interpretation of some of the heritage principles that are within this precinct. So what we've done is we've taken our cues from the existing streetscape, the existing building stock. So the materiality, the plant palette, the look and feel that we're trying to create from the landscape point of view is very much about kind of reinforcing the streetscape. So I'll just go through this pack quickly. And I guess importantly, we're trying to capture the kind of East Fremantle vernacular. So the use of limestone, colours, brickwork, which are prevalent through this particular precinct, is being reflected in the landscape. The idea of creating front gardens, extensive front gardens, we think very generous, that kind of, I guess, encourages interaction with the street. So people walking by, what we try to encourage is people sitting out there, interact with people walking past. So it's very much about a strong relationship to the street, but in a modern, I guess, a modern setting. Upper level landscape is very much about trying to soften the impact of the building from above. Fairly straightforward planters that we do, on a daily basis. From a compliance point of view, whilst we don't meet the extent of deep soil and landscape, we do have an extensive amount of soft landscape and landscape generally. So we think from a project-wide point of view, we have responded to this setting in terms of materiality, look and feel, and I think we've got a generosity there that I think is really appropriate for this type of building. So we've basically shown the extent of planting, the deep soil areas, as well as then tree planting. So the idea is trees within the front areas would be endemics, and in the rear, different fruit trees. So the idea is to create a sense of community between the residents. Plant palette, so very much about creating an endemic streetscape, noticing the existing trees that are along there already. So it's very much about an endemic streetscape quality that responds to the East Fremantle context. And then in the rear yards, vegetation that is encouraged to share with your neighbours. Plant palette.
3 minutes. I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Yep. So I guess from our point of view, we've really taken note of the architectural quality, which is very much we think a historical or modern interpretation of the history of this precinct, represented in the landscape quality of the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Right, Sean, your 3 minutes starts when you're ready.
Could I get the... Okay, thank you. So to finish off today, my dissertation will focus on 3 key aspects of the proposal. These are context and character, building envelope, and visitor parking. So I'm going to start with context and character. I don't know if I can. Great. The subject site is located adjacent to both the established residential neighbourhood of the Clinton Ward, which has been covered extensively in the RAR, and also the Canning Highway mixed-use corridor. Given its location, this site represents a strategic infill opportunity to deliver much-needed housing within an established urban area. The design process began with a comprehensive analysis of the Clinton Ward, which you see on the screen here, elements of. Here we begin to see the recurring materiality, landscape character, and rhythm of the surrounding streets, with some examples to the left and right. Focusing on the material palette, key elements include limestone, red brickwork, and native planting. This established material palette has been reinterpreted using contemporary materials that echo the tonality and character of the Clinton Ward. This reflects the key Borough Charter principle that new architecture should be contemporary and distinguishable while respecting the significance of its heritage setting. The resulting materiality is contemporary in its expression while remaining tonally consistent and sympathetic to the broader character of the Clinton Ward. Reflecting the urban rhythm and scale of the adjacent residential neighbourhood, the design is carefully articulated through curved vertical elements that break down the overall massing. Secondary horizontal elements balance the vertical articulation, creating a cohesive architectural composition. Together, these elements form a contemporary architectural response that sits comfortably within the established heritage character of the area. So turning now to building envelope, I'd like to briefly address the town's interpretation. The scheme amendment explicitly permits non-habitable resident amenities outside the prescribed building envelope, with roof terraces, gardens, and shade structures provided as examples of these. Consistent with this approach, all habitable built form within the design shown in blue is contained within the prescribed building envelope, and these diagrams in red is the envelope to show how underdeveloped the site is at this stage. The elements extending beyond the prescribed building envelope are predominantly ground plane features, including raised planters, retaining walls and entry gates, which in our view are not intended to be captured by building envelope controls. The remaining projections comprise ancillary architectural elements in the form of curved mid-walls, each projecting less than 550 millimetres. We consider these non-habitable architectural elements to be consistent with the scheme. However, if the panel were to reach a different interpretation, these elements could readily be removed by a condition, and that's the items shown in orange.
You are at your 3 minutes.
Great, I'll wrap up. Thank you. Finally, I'd like to address visitor parking. As mentioned, we have there's visitor parking adjacent to the site shown in red, and we're seeking for this to be assessed against the overarching design principles rather than a deemed to comply standard. This approach provides convenient visitor parking while achieving a high quality streetscape. And it's also worth mentioning that the scheme amendment does not allow parking facing St Peters Road. Thanks very much, and that's all from me.
Thank you very much. Panel members, questions of the applicant team. Councillor Collinson, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, well, I've got a few. Might start off with the trees. Now, you're removing the trees that are part of stage 2 already, and I'm just wondering why you're doing that at stage 1 and not waiting until you've got an approval or whatever for stage 2.
I'm not aware of removing any trees on.
I could speak to this. We were doing that for laydown purposes of constructing stage 1. However, we have seen the council's proposed tree retention diagram, and we are happy with that if that's a condition that can allow the approval to be the development to be approved.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think in stage 2, we're going to get more detail, obviously, about the trees. So there's some trees that won't be able to stay due to basement, but then we'll be replacing. And obviously, that Norfolk Island, that Morden Bay, that fig tree, that's always going to stay as per the original SDAU approval.
And you gave a bit of an explanation for the Malcolm Mackay report, why you didn't take any of that on board. Is there anything in that you think you could take on board? I mean, even though we don't necessarily have to force you to do it, but I thought he came up with a lot of good suggestions, and perhaps it could be improved a little bit.
And I think that's the point. Malcolm will come up with good ideas, but so will Sean and Andrew and other architects. But it's such a subjective discussion about design and things like that. You know, I've been involved for 10 years in this project. I would have thought 9 terraces on St Peters would be a very good outcome. The detail of the architecture, you know, we engaged Sean. That's his style. He tries to interpret that style within the local precinct as well. I mean, maybe Sean, you can respond to that question a bit as well in regards to what was in Malcolm's report and how you interpreted the actual project and the brief we gave you.
Yeah, maybe just as a starting point, from a landscape point of view, absolutely. You know, there are a lot of good things there in detail that would normally come as part of the next stage anyway, in terms of final species selection, you know, other bits and pieces that's been proposed. So we're happy to take that on board. Sure.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, for us, it's free advice, right? So we'll take the good stuff out of it, no doubt about it. And the stuff that we can't incorporate or we think we have a better idea or an equivalent idea, then we interpret and put it in that regard.
And probably just to finish the answer to that, there was a lack of the complete documentation as submitted was not assessed as part of that design advice. So there were other bits around sustainability that was subsequently submitted, and I just wanted to mention that as well. So yes, we do look at that, but if we gave, you could have 10 different individuals review and they would all give different advice. I think we have to also be clear about how this responds to both the planning principles overarching and also the area.
I think we'll go back through Malcolm's report in detail before we start design development. That's when we get to the detail and see what we can pick out of it. Yeah.
And
Thank you.
thirdly,
Councillor Colson, before you move on, I think Member Hyman has a follow-up question.
okay.
to clarify, if the town had adopted the normal design review panel process, which gives you that opportunity to interact, that would have been better for you, surely.
I can speak to that. We met the town 3 times pre-lodgement, 3 meetings with the planning team, and it was on the final meeting where we were then told that they needed to run this process, and that was only after there was some sentiment expressed that they didn't like the building, the planning team didn't like it. So we felt it was quite a reactive process and maybe not following a clear process that allowed us to meaningfully engage. By that point, we had taken on feedback in the first 2 meetings around overarching setback. We pulled the building back, we pulled the parapet down to meet the AHD height. And we were then told, oh, we don't like the look of the building, we're going to send it through this process, and that we won't accept the submission until that process happens, which actually was not followed. We did submit it because we didn't feel that was correct.
Thank you. Councillor Collins, back to you.
Yeah, you mentioned a minute ago sustainability, and I know our officer's report does state that, you know, you meet the NABERS basic requirement, but you know, I think a lot of people in our community would like you to really go a bit further than that.
Yep.
So are there opportunities, you think, to go further and get something a little bit even more sustainable than what you've already got?
I can answer that question. Yeah, so while the process for the DAP's been occurring, I've been talking to 5 different builders. So we're getting the builder in the process as more of a, not a design and construct, but as a more of a consultant to take us through the process. So design materials and all that will come into play quite a bit. Double glazing are given and all those elements. I think we would always, even just from a marketing point of view nowadays, the market's very aware of sustainability. So if we can actually be seen as doing something special, especially in this area, but I think it's more sensitive as well. I think that East Fremantle locality, people are more aware of environmental sustainability. So I think we would be aiming to increase it, but at this stage we've got to put in what we have to do, but we will try to exceed on that, because it's good for the project, it's good for the end user, and it's good for marketing as well. But the building materials we choose on this can be quite diverse nowadays. There's quite a few options, and that might go a lot into the sustainability elements within the project.
Further questions?
I'm fine.
Councillor White.
Thank you. Just reading the town submission, but also reading the responses and hearing some of the discussion today. Were there any substantive changes between the one that was lodged and reviewed and the one that we are reviewing here today? Could you just run through what substantial or significant amendments were made?
Yeah, sure. In terms of the elevations, planning, that was unchanged.
Yeah.
Most of the changes involved additional working diagrams, studies, and then reports that were all submitted as part of the DA supporting the documented building. And they weren't ready yet when the council originally did their design advice report. And as Phil's mentioned, we also didn't have the right of presenting and receiving the feedback and actually acting on it. So it was just done in a way that made it very difficult for us to respond.
Okay. In respect to your comment that the town's officers stated they didn't like the look of the building, did they articulate or draw out any particular aspect of the look that, and was it expressly stated in such a manner?
It was expressly stated. I might just leave it at that. There was a few things thrown around, but it was a strange conversation to have with the planning team.
Okay.
Yeah, we sit normally because it didn't have a lot of basis tying it back to planning principles.
Okay. In terms of the whole site and stage 1 and stage 2, I personally had, and I'm not a planner, so please forgive me for some ignorance, but I was challenged slightly by the fact that, for example, the demolition plan covers stage 1 and stage 2, but we're really only looking at stage 1 with this application. Is that correct?
So stage 1 has correct.
Yeah.
Stage 1 has a basement, and there'll be over excavation to build those basement walls, and that over excavation sort of falls into the area of stage 2. Stage 2 is also required as a laydown area to construct stage 1, ideally. So given the state of those buildings, it was a clear choice for us to remove them as part of stage 1 works instead of propping them up and trying to make the basement construction more difficult.
Sure. Oh, look, I certainly
Yeah.
understand it from a practical perspective. I just want to pick on your comment about the council's suggestions in relation to the retention of trees. I'm assuming that that also applies to the 3 birch trees. So,
Correct.
all right, so they
Yeah.
would remain.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I
Right,
only
great.
sort of see 2 of them, but yeah, the
Yep.
survey shows 3, and I think 1 might not be there anymore. But they're all fine to be retained.
There's only 2.
Yeah, there is 2. Yeah.
Right. Okay. In terms of, and I'm just going to go back a little bit. We're amalgamating the 4 titles, and then there's going to be a re-subdivision. So, to me, being a layperson, it would seem like a master plan for the site would have been better. Something, because, like I said, I found it hard to contemplate the effect of what's happening on the whole site with just looking at what's going to happen in that first stage 1. Was there a reason why you did it that way?
So that's been mentioned a few times. In our report, there is a master plan page showing a building position for the stage 1
Yeah.
sort of vertical element. It shows a large public park.
Yep.
And then it shows stage 2. I think beyond that, we're trying to just show the detail involved in stage 2 to make it clear that that's what's being assessed. But the diagram in the report showing where the building element of stage 1 is, and that's been calculated to provide the compliant overshadowing to the south. That information was sort of presented and should be available.
Look, I did see that.
Okay,
So
cool.
thank you for that. I saw the park.
And I guess
And-
beyond that, we're
Yeah,
not.
but we can't really rely on that because there's still no firm plans on what's going to
Correct.
happen.
So we're planning on starting that process now.
Yep.
We did those initial investigations just to understand it. So we had many designs. So if you're familiar with the scheme, we can have roughly a 9-story envelope
Yep.
bulk to all boundaries.
Yep.
Or we can give up the POS, public open space, extend 50 square metres.
Yep.
And then we can pop up to an AHD, which gets us 18, 19.
Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, so you're fully aware of it. So
Yeah.
we did the whole mass based on 9 stories, and then the terraces were getting compromised, and they weren't very nice spaces and then we decided to go back. Can we actually get enough POS there?
Yep.
And then we created a little tower, and then did the overshadowing, and it sat quite nicely between the 2 projects because they have quite a lot of POS between them. Nice open space. Cross viewing wasn't a problem, and the amenities seemed really good. So that's where we ended up, but we can't really present too much until we spend a lot of money and a lot of time on the next level of investigation. Sure. I think Sean sort of presented the most he could at this point in time.
Okay.
But one of the landowners actually, Sean's drawings and did a 3D printed model of it. It looks pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
You know, in the town's report, they actually said that the refusal was not discretionary, and I'm aware of the communication since that. Have you got any more comments in relation to that?
And the refusal.
That the town in their report, I think is in. They said that the
To the envelope. is it?
yeah. So
Well, we can, we've thought about this. We interpret it one way, council interprets another way. Like I said, we don't want to get bogged down in it, so we'll be happy for, like, I've spoken to Sean about the blade on the terraces.
yeah.
They can be removed.
It's a strange.
The rest of it is, fencing. Terraces need a courtyard space and privacy and a bit of security at the front, so some low fencing and planted walls well and truly fits within the scheme, because in the previous SDOU process, we had many more things sitting outside the boundary.
There are planters and entry gates, and it's not normal to construe them as being controlled by built envelope. So we were a little bit puzzled by that approach, and so we have both, I guess, justified our position. But you'll notice in my one, we've also said if this is the view of the DAP as well, we are happy to condition out these mid walls. We don't think it's necessary, but we've kind of given that option as well.
Okay, and one of the things I wanted to discuss briefly, and I see your comments in relation to visitor parking. I mean, those car parks are generally available for people for Tradewinds Hotel, and parking is tight through the whole area and becoming increasingly so. And I was just, you know, and I guess going back to the master plan aspects, to what extent would stage 2 rely on the single to visitor car parks?
It's a good question. It's something we haven't been able to articulate in this submission, but stage 2 will have its own visitor parking. And so the tiny townhouses, you know, it's a very tight bit of site, and we weren't allowed to have any parking facing St. Peter's Road under the scheme. That has been resolved as it is now, but stage 2 will provide visitor parking for the whole development. So we're also happy for that to be a condition.
Okay, I think I'm okay. Just in terms of the soft landscaping, and again, I understand the differences, and I read your response, and I guess in my own mind is trying to understand the level of significance of the discretion asked in terms of a reduction in soft landscaping. For example, is there any capacity, you haven't done the subdivision yet, to move the boundary a little bit further? Is there a reason why you couldn't do it and achieve the landscaping?
The boundary of the development.
We haven't looked at it. No, there's not.
So we need to get for stage 2, we've got the tower element.
Yep.
And then we've got to get that square metre, 1650 square metres of 1680 square metres public open space. So I guess those terraces have been designed so they've got rear gates going up the POS, so they're going to benefit from that as well.
Yep.
And it's worth mentioning to that point that because of that, the way that's conceived, stage 2 has an extremely large amount of landscaping and open space. It's got a very small bit of form, notwithstanding that stage 1 still only is a minor deficiency in landscaping. And that's typically around, I think Andrew can comment as well, but the front courtyards, we could make them all garden, but we wanted them to be dual use. We wanted them to be a space you could actually sit in, use, engage with the street, as well as landscaping, garden. You'll see from our renders, we've got lots of trees, shrubs. We worked really hard to get that layered, but we did want it to be a functional space as well, and not just a garden.
So in terms of physical area, Councillor, there's certainly space to do that, to increase soft landscape to both front and rear. But I guess we are leveraging off, particularly from the rear, that the fact that these the rear units will have access to the public open space. So, and I guess it's about creating a level of amenity. And I think Sean's point about creating areas where people can sit in their front yard and converse with people walking past was we thought was very relevant.
That's my questions, mate.
Thank you.
Just following on from that, I suppose it would have been useful to, in your submission, to indicate that the public open space is really compensating for the diminished soft landscaping.
So I guess we didn't really see it that way, but it is definitely overcompensating for stage 2. Yeah, I understand. Appreciate that.
In your submission, you suggested a few changes to some relations to some of the conditions, but you didn't reference condition 26, which is about the parking. Minimum 2, not that I saw, sorry, I might have missed that, but
we did.
where it says you need to have 2 resident parking bays.
Sorry, just to clarify, in the presentation that came forward, the conditions were sort of split between, there were some conditions and then some other slides, and then the slides for the other requested changes.
So I missed it.
We're not really in the right spot.
So we have, it was at least
Okay,
submitted.
sorry.
Yeah.
So in other words,
Because that was a big.
it'd be impossible to put 2
Correct.
parking bays where.
That's right. It's essentially a
That's right.
refusal.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Can I just follow up on that report? Will it though? Will it be impossible? Is there any way you can put 2 visitor bays in that basement somewhere
No.
without a full redesign of the proposal?
No, not with the way it is now.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
My final one, but I went on site walked around, stood around the property. And I was trying to get into my head how this has got heritage character. If I take away the cottage, all I could see was Stirling Highway, Canning Highway, trade winds, and some older but not heritage properties. Right. So, what's your assessment of that? I mean, I understand behind going up the hill, Clinton area, it's got heritage character, but I couldn't see any heritage character down
Well,
there.
I think it questions that it goes to the crux of the issue we've been dealing with, which is that this site interfaces between an 18 to 19 story building, a large public open space, the Trade Winds Hotel, which is its most close neighbour, and then properties to St Peter's Road, which effectively have their side or back to the property, and then up King Street you have.
So I wondered if I was missing something in that process.
And so I think that's where the design has come through, is that we have taken a contemporary approach which will be a midpoint between the tower element and the existing residential dwellings. And this project sort of deals between, it has a foot in both camps there, and we didn't feel that a imitation of a heritage type project would be appropriate here.
Thank you. I will ask the town the same question.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'm a few comments along the same line. So my understanding, there was a few comments in here about the development positively respond to the context and if you would like I just actually like a lot about what we've done.
Is there a question?
Well,
We'll come back to your comments in a bit.
no, the question is, but what Malcolm did outline was somewhere between its follow up and what Clayton's talking about, is that the things that were missing, including reducing the perceived scale, finer horizontal articulation, more varied appropriate material selection, improved fencing permeability, and alignment with established character of the area. Now, I think you're so close to that. You're talking about the permeable fences, but they're actually quite high, and you're talking about that interaction in the street. So I think they're too high, and the permeable should be twice as much or something. It wouldn't lose anything from the design. I think you've got canopies which could be played and showed images of different materials and red brick, and then it's all beige. So there's things that you could pull up which cover what Malcolm's talked about the horizontality of those parts of the area, and particularly the end elevation, which is the starkest on the end, needs. It's quite right. It's the wrong process, as you pointed out, but it does need some looking at. I think it's really close to achieve.
So can I just ask Sean to respond to that, because we're asking the team questions now. Given the queries that are being raised now, could you respond to that? Is it something that you could look at through detailed design to factor in more of that?
I think it's going to be very difficult to capture in a condition with any potential approval. I appreciate Malcolm's comments, and I will reiterate that they came too late for us, but this building is sitting next to a pretty brutal Trade Winds Hotel section and an 18-story tower. And I think within that context, the future context of this area, I'm not sure if it's appropriate to be borrowing brick corbelling or other details from the heritage section. And I'm not saying you're saying that either, but I guess that it was something the town had said to us, so it's just in my mind. But I just feel that the verticality of this 3 and 2 story elements works really well when it's viewed against the larger site planning of the area, which is effectively an 18-story building. I don't think we want to actually make this feel more horizontal when it's got that context next to it.
You've got canopies. That's that.
I think it's a question.
No, it's important. The new walls, you shouldn't.
Sorry?
The new walls.
We're going to pick that up when we debate the item. Right now, we're just dealing with questions. Do you have any more questions?
There's a solution.
We can talk about that in the next.
Certainly
next
accommodate
bits.
the permeable fencing, more permeable.
So
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
all right. Okay, I have some questions before we head to the local government. So in the RA, the town has expressed concerns, and I'm using their words, about shortcomings in livability, flexibility, service placement, waste bin storage, and clarity of access and circulation. Do you want to comment on that briefly?
Don't know if it needs a whole lot of comment, but I feel like even their own report has said that it achieves most of the overarching principles of SPP 1.0. I think their waste referrals, technical services said the bins are working as proposed. I have a couple of the other ones you mentioned, but I don't know if we need to justify it too much more. It seems like it's quite adequately resolved in the application as it is.
Okay, thank you. You've requested, and we're talking about, just for anybody that might be watching, we're going to talk about conditions now, even though they're not recommended for approval. There have been some conditions added in the event the staff decides to approve. So we will talk about that through the process. So I'm going to query, you've requested some amendments to condition 14, and you've provided reasons why you want those. But to me, when I look at those two conditions, they're very similar in intent and effect. So
what would you say, 14?
14. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering what the concern is with 14, because when I look at them, yes, they worded differently, but the intent of them and the effect of them is actually pretty much the same.
I think for us it was the sample board, the physical sample board. We had never seen such a condition giving physical materials to a local council. So that kind of just seemed a bit unusual to us, and we've tried to bring this back into what we feel is a more normal condition.
And then just briefly again, you've asked us to delete condition 15, and that relates to the bathroom windows for unit 1 and unit 9.
Yeah.
And you've asked us to delete that because you're of the view the design principles of the codes are being met. And in your submission, you've explained the implications of including those windows and the complications of including them, but not necessarily why you think that your proposal meets the design principles. Did you want to talk further to that at the minute?
That's mostly about unit 9, that response. Unit 1 does have a window there for a powder room, and we could make that operable. So that one's actually not a problem. But unit 9, it's basically following an established format of other zero lot townhouses in the development. And so the layouts are tailored to that. There is some repetition and kind of scale through that. And it was also deemed that the windows facing onto the driveway with fumes and vehicle noise were not congruent with a serene bathroom either. So we sort of decided to leave it.
Okay. What we might do now, thank you to the applicant team for presenting and taking questions. I'll ask you to take your seats that you had before. We're going to move to the section now where we invite questions of the local government officers. And I believe we have Fraser Henderson, James Bannerman, Christine Catapole, and Malcolm Mackay with us today, representing the town of East Fremantle. Do you want to take seats at the table? Okay. I don't want you to repeat what's in the RA or summarise the application because we have read it. But I'm going to ask you if there are any comments you would like to make on the deputations that were made by the applicant team or others today. Otherwise, I have lots of questions. I'm sure the other members also do. If you're happy for us just to move straight to questions, we can do that. But if you want to take a couple of minutes to respond to the deputations, you can do so.
I don't think the members, good afternoon. I don't think the pre-lodgement meeting scenario was expressed in exactly the same way that the planning team would view the discussions that preceded the submission of the application. We did meet, I think, on 3 occasions, and on each occasion, I think it was clearly communicated that there were perhaps some technical issues associated with this legal technical issues associated with the approval because of the previously enclosed building envelope, and also that we had some design concerns and that we wanted to obtain some copies of the plans early on so we could get those assessed by a suitably qualified person and enter into further discussions about refining those designs and working through that with the applicant. But I think it's fair and reasonable to say that they indicated to us that they didn't wish to refine or revise the plans. They were happy with what they were, they had developed to that point, and that they were going to submit that. So we did request several times copies of the plan so we could have further design analysis of it, because we don't have those in-house abilities, and it didn't eventuate that way. So we felt that under our, I think, right to do so under clause 67 of the deemed provisions, we could seek other advice, and that's what we did. And we did rely on that, because it was one of our major concerns with this development proposal was the built form design outcome for the site.
And I'd just like to touch on the design review process.
Okay.
Doing it, I did an independent peer review on this one, but the town doesn't have a DRP of its own. The independent peer review process is not unusual. It happens quite a lot. I have undertaken independent peer reviews for numerous local governments, even more so in the olden days before a lot of local governments got their DRPs, and I still undertake them. In fact, I undertook one yesterday for the Shire of Murray. So it is a valid process. It's a normal process. It doesn't involve the applicants being in the room. In giving the review that I did was against a document prepared by the applicant, which was scheduled according to the 10 principles of SPP7, which in my view was a reasonable document to review.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm sure any other issues will be captured in the questions we might have for you. I'm going to start with Councillor Collins. Any questions of the local government officers?
Yes, we've received correspondence that does say that the development can be approved in its current form, which is a bit contrary to your report. Now, hearing what you've heard now, would you still agree that it probably can't be approved?
Well, look, town's position is that this is a technical one rather than a planning merit one. It considers that the relevant elements other than the metal canopies do not fall within the specific exceptions as identified in Schedule 13. That was our interpretation of the wording of the clause in the scheme. Consequently, we treated them as encroachments beyond the building envelope that require the DAP's exercise of discretion to whether the exceptions are met, rather than being automatically exempt from this mandatory building envelope. And I'm sure you've read the provisions under clause 510(1) and then again in Schedule 13. So the issue is not whether the encroachments are acceptable, it's a technical legal one, is whether they meet the definition of an exemption under the scheme provisions.
Yes, regarding the visitor parking, now we heard from the applicants that they were going to include that in stage 2. Is that acceptable to you, or can you suggest, another condition that will ensure that it will happen in stage 2?
Well, I suppose the issue in stage 2 is that, as you're aware, the development that was approved 3 years ago hasn't gone ahead. Stage 2 is concept. We don't know if and when it will go ahead. We have to assess this development application on its own merits within the planning framework that exists. And as has been previously mentioned, parking is a very serious issue in that area. It's escalating daily, and we have ongoing concerns and issues with parking, clashing with residents and commercial users. We can't provide any more parking, and we've got no guarantees that stage 2 will proceed. As they have suggested it will proceed. It may not. As you're aware, the Amendment 14 to the scheme provided 2 options for development of that site, and one of them is not inclusive of open space or ample areas for additional parking. So it's an unknown, and we have got some serious parking issues.
And the applicant said they couldn't possibly fit the 2 visitor parking bays in the current development. Would you agree with that?
Well, within the confines of the current footprint, they couldn't, but there's a very large parcel of land on that corner. So I would imagine there would be other options. And parking is contained within the basement too, so there may be options there.
Okay.
Councillor White, questions?
One second. I guess, look, I think Councillor Conson asked the main of my questions. I just go back to your response to the comments about the tree clearing on stage 1. I think in particular that they would be agreeable to that. That is something that you would be happy with as an outcome?
No, we're saying the reverse. We want the trees retained.
Yes.
Yes.
But didn't they say that they would agree with that?
It seems as though they are agreeable to that. From what's been said, yes. We've indicated which trees we feel should be retained, and that's on site and within the road verge, and we've indicated that on a plan. But there's also some of the larger and better specimens are in the main roads reserve, and so they can't be removed anyway. They're bordering on the lot boundaries, but they're actually within the main roads reserve, and so any proposal to remove those would require main roads approval. But we would like to see all the trees outside the development footprint retained.
And that's a development footprint for area
Stage 1.
Stage 1.
That's right.
Okay. And I guess I appreciated your question about the locality within Plimpton, and particularly, Malcolm, your comments about the character scale, and forgive me for my sort of clumsy words, but basically the bulk and scale was inconsistent with the precinct, and I'm still trying to really understand that, given you've got the trade winds and you've got the non-heritage houses on the other side of St Peter's Road. Could you just expand a little bit on the comments, because to me that they kind of go to the heart of, I guess, the rejection or the proposed rejection of the proposal as we see it.
Yeah, we're happy to provide some explanation around that. As far as the bulk is concerned, I don't really have any issues with the bulk of the building. It's a 3-story terrace townhouse. There are lots of precedences around the metropolitan area, even going back a long way for 2- and 3-story terrace townhousing. So that for me is not an issue. The issue is the way in which it is expressed, and it's expressed in a way that it lacks the fine-grained level of detail and the horizontal layering and the well-proportioned windows, the textures, all of those things that make older buildings in particular that much more visually appealing. And it's got sort of the brutal sort of 3-story vertical elements. That is a scale that is far and beyond pretty well anything else in the area, with perhaps the exception of the church on Canning Highway, which is a sort of kind of Art Deco thing going on. But for a residential building, that's just the scale is wrong. So, from speaking as in architectural language, scale is not necessarily about the massiveness of something. It's about the size of the elements that are used to put the building together. Does that help?
Oh, it does in part, but yeah.
Just following on, if I can, from Malcolm's comments, the aims of the scheme and the mixed-use zone objectives are that any new development be sympathetic to the character of the area and Plimpton precinct, and that the character and amenity is very important in built form outcomes. So in that respect, we felt the application was not as respectful as it could be in light of Malcolm's comments in terms of its fit with the Plimpton precinct and it is in a prominent location on that corner site. So we felt trying to align the building with the objectives of the mixed use zone was important as well.
So can I just ask, but the character of that area is not just defined by the older
No.
elements, is it? It's there is a mix of style in that precinct. So would you agree that the character of the area as we look at it today is based on everything in that area, or just select?
No, I think for the age of that, sorry, Malcolm, the age of that precinct is remarkably, I think, intact, given it was developed in the late 1890s. Now, yes, there's a mix of commercial heritage buildings, and there's the highway strip, which contains quite a few commercial heritage listed buildings. We've got a lot of heritage listed buildings on George Street. We've got buildings like the Royal George Hotel, which is state heritage listed, but I think it's remarkably intact in terms of its heritage character.
Why even listed as a precinct then?
Sorry?
Why is it not listed as a precinct?
Part of it is listed as a heritage designated area. Part of it, the George Street commercial strip is listed as a designated heritage area, has been since 2020. And in fact, had other priorities not overtaken us, we probably would have been looking at considering Plimpton precinct as a heritage area.
Yeah, a residential design guideline as well identifies the precinct within there and puts some specific objectives within there for development within that precinct.
Great, that's not in your rather, is it? So that was going to be another question of mine.
It's
but before
touched on in the RA, but
before we go to that, Malcolm was going to add to that, and then I'll just segue into some of my questions given this conversation, and then I'll hand to the other members. Malcolm.
I was going to say there is a diversity of architecture in the area, but normally when one undertakes a context and character analysis, you put precedence on those elements that are more significant. So obviously the heritage elements in the broader locality are the most significant. Those are the ones you look at first. And then you look at the prevailing building type in the area, and that's kind of your second level. And then your third level is the other stuff. Now, it's always tempting when you're sitting on the applicant side of the table, as I do from time to time, to draw inspiration from the other stuff because it's kind of easy. But there is a real danger in that, is that if you perpetuate the newer and perhaps less characterful elements, it's a bit like the analogy of the frog in the slowly boiling water, that you diminish the place one building at a time until you reach a point where suddenly the character has been lost. So those character elements, and I think hopefully that answers the question I was going to get from Clayton too, about what character elements you draw from the area in the site assessment.
Yeah, thank you. You drew on the importance of the corner site, and I'm assuming you were talking about the corner of Stirling Highway and Canning Highway. This development sits on St Peter's Road, largely unseen in the future from that corner. And I guess one of the things that I'm trying to get in terms of is that the lack of a master plan, that we can't actually look at this site in totality, kind of makes, and to some extent, the proponents are relying on what's going to happen in stage 2 to justify some elements of this. And I can understand their perspective, but again, it goes to the heart that it's hard to put this in context when you don't understand the plan for the whole corner site. Is that something that you would concur with, or am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, I think it would have been far more helpful to understand what was going on across the whole of the site. From a strategic perspective, it's important in terms of our traffic engineering, our consideration of access arrangements, to know what road widening would be required, what trees can be retained, what public open space is going to be there. So yes, there are a lot of unknowns in respect to the site long term.
And I'd add that was one of the reasons that I ever read for context and character, because for me that was a fundamental piece of contextual information as to what's happening in stage 2 and how that related to stage 1. And there's gates out the back, but where do they go? What's the pedestrian network? How is there's arguably a shortfall of deep soil? If that's the case, how does the other side of stage 2 compensate for it? What are the residents at this stage looking at? What are the residents at the future stage looking back at? There's a whole question mark around that, and the information that was provided was really just a footprint of where the future building might go. For me, it was insufficient context, and I think a master plan would be a fundamental part of any context analysis.
So just on that master plan, so do you have any ability under your planning framework to compel a master plan for that site?
To what, sorry?
To require a master plan for that site? And even, because I don't think you do,
No,
but I'm asking
I
you.
don't think we do.
And even if the applicant was to submit one, and I'm asking this question because I've seen this happen somewhere else, it would have no statutory weight, would it? And the applicant could change it or submit a development application that is completely different to that master plan.
Yes, I guess that's one of the issues that I agree with you. My understanding is the current planning provisions were put on there on the basis of a building that was proposed there, and so they drew lines up and things around it, and that didn't go ahead for whatever reasons, and so the applicant has now come forward with their proposal, and part of their proposal relies on things that may or may not happen in the future, and it has to be dealt with what's there now, and it has to be dealt with firmly understanding that what might not happen in the future might not happen in the future. I don't think we have particular issues with the whole development on that regard, except for like knocking the trees down now, or the car parking, which, because it's a big site, there is a provision to make it put the car parking on that site. I'm not saying 2 days, but I don't know if you have driven around there, but it's a constant pressure on the town about dealing with the car parking when that area was designed well before.
Okay, so we've talked, and we'll talk a little bit about car parking in a bit, but I guess just to confirm, there is nothing that could compel submission of a master plan for this site, and even if one was submitted as part of a development application in an explanatory sense, there's nothing to say that any development application would need to align with that master plan could be changed with the stroke of a pen, could it not?
Except, and I'm speaking as someone who's done master plans for 40 years, and I'm well aware of the statutory limitations around them, but they are an important piece of contextual information. So under SPP 7, Principle 1, it actually becomes a really important piece of jigsaw.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just from a statutory planning decision maker's perspective, how do you use that as a reason to refuse something or to contribute to a reason for refusal? Very difficult proposition. So that's why I'm asking the question. I'm going to run a series of questions by you now, and then I'm going to hand to the other members, and there are quite a few, but they do speak to your stated reasons for refusal. And if I summarize your reasons for refusal as non-compliance with Schedule 13, no visitor parking, inadequate soft landscaping area, and the architectural design of the building, that would be correct, right? Okay, so I might separate those out and ask questions on each of those things. So if we look at Schedule 13 first, on page 17 of the RIE, you say that the intent of Schedule 13 is to control height and prevent buildings from encroaching into the St. Peters Road setback area. Now, there are boundary fences in that space. They're not considered buildings under the R code. So I just wanted to check with you, are you comfortable? Do you think it's reasonable to allow boundary walls and front fences in that setback area or not?
If I'm not speaking from the technical viewpoint, because again, that's a legal matter and a technical definition of whether or not they're considered structures.
Well, I am asking you what your interpretation is of the words of Schedule 13, whether you think boundary walls and fences could be included in that.
My understanding of that was that there were no structures at all to be included in that area. under the intent of Amendment 14, and that the building was to be set back at 4 metres from that.
But
Lot
what
boundary.
if, as per the code, boundary fences, and they're not considered buildings? So they're structures, but they're not considered buildings. If the intent was to set buildings back, is it reasonable to expect that boundary fences, boundary walls separating dwellings and boundary fences? Let's not talk about the design of them at the minute. Let's just talk about whether that can be there or not. Is it reasonable to assume that they could be located in that space?
Well, if you're basing it on definitions, then yes, I guess it is reasonable to assume that.
I'm just going by what's in your report. So just going back to non-compliance, in relation to the perceived non-compliance with Schedule 13, we're essentially considering the encroachment of those fin walls and the planter boxes into the 4 metre setback area, not necessarily the height of them. They're not
That's
over
correct.
height. It's
That's
just
correct.
the encroachment.
The
Okay.
encroachment in the setback, yes, because it was so specific in terms of suggesting that they were non-habitable structures, and that this building is in fact habitable, and it's attached to that. It's a technical point rather than a merit-based point.
Okay, so just on that, then, the wording of that first exemption in Schedule 13, the second point, number 2, references non-habitable resident amenities such as roof terraces, gardens, and shade structures. So in my view, inclusion of the words such as suggests that other similar exclusions could be considered, provided they're suitably integrated with the architecture of the development. Do you agree with that?
That's right, and that's why we agreed that metal canopies could perhaps be included, and we were accepting of that, but it was the technical nature and the legal question behind the other structures.
Okay.
Particularly as non-habitable was referenced first, and that all these things were attached to a habitable structure, but again, technical rather than merit-based issue.
This amendment is going to be the bane of everyone's life.
Yes.
Okay. Very quickly on visitor parking. So could I just confirm that the resident parking exceeds the requirements of the codes?
It doesn't exceed the requirements of the codes because it
The
doesn't have
minimum
any
requirements.
The minimum requirements, yes, that's correct.
Okay, it's considered a location A under the codes, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So in one of your reasons for refusal, you say the proposal doesn't satisfy the design principles of the art codes in relation to visitor parking. And when I go to your assessment, because you've got your assessment in one of the attachments, I didn't see any actual assessment and reporting against those design principles. You just say that it doesn't meet them. So I'm just trying to, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, the parking's being, the design shows parking being provided on the street. It's not being provided on site.
Yeah.
And the town takes the view that parking provided on the street is not sufficient.
Yeah, and that comes through in the report, but there doesn't seem to be a design principles assessment against the design principles in the codes.
Basically, because the claim was made that the parking's from the street and that's where the parking is going to be provided for the visitor parking.
Okay. So I understand and acknowledge your point that parking is not allowed in the front of the development on St. Peter's Road, but I'm assuming that applies to on-site parking, right? So is there any potential for on-street bays in St. Peter's?
Not
Or is
there.
the road reserved just not?
It's not wide enough, and it would be dangerous. It's at the top of the hill. It intersects with the St. Peter's Road, Saul Street intersection is very complex, prevents access. There's only one-way access along Saul Street. It's very close to the intersection of Canning and Stirling Highway. The parking that is there now is only for limited amounts of time. Services the Tradewinds Hotel and the commercial premises on the corner of Saul Street, Canning Highway. So what limited parking there is on the street now is used by the hotel, and it's what was formerly a liquor store, possibly another liquor store will go in there, but it services those commercial uses, and they have five minutes, and maybe some 10-minute, but there's certainly 3 or 4 5-minute bays.
Okay. Given your concerns about the increasing demand on street parking in the area, is there any potential, and maybe not for the reasons you've just stated, but is there any potential for the applicant to provide 2 visitor bays directly to the east of the site in that lead triangle between the site and the footpath that runs through that POS. There seems to be a little triangle space that you.
Yeah, no, there isn't. That's not, it's been canvassed before.
Okay.
But the council want to do that. There's various proposals by the community to put gardens and things in there. The area itself is potentially some issues around, could be contaminated from some of these other sort of complications that would no doubt be resolved, but would hard to be defined about what they were around there. So it's not something that the town would be supportive of looking into.
Kristen, I thought you mentioned that there was an opportunity for some off-street parking somewhere else on that site. I'm just not sure.
Oh, just, you know, in the available land that's on the site.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, outside of stage 1.
So is that what your condition 26 would allude to? It's not saying it has to be on this site. I'm sorry, on stage 1. It can be anywhere on stage 1 or 2.
That's right, correct.
If we can look at soft landscaping now and the reasons for refusal. So on page 20 of your report, you state that the design principles in relation to clause 121 and 122 of the codes, which deal with soft landscaping, cannot be met. And you've used the tree removal on the land set aside for stage 2 as reasons for taking that position. Given the applicant will now retain the existing trees on the land set aside for stage 2 to be dealt with as part of stage 2, would you then consider the design principles of those clauses to be satisfied?
I think there's a big difference between the open space provided on site in stage 1 and the open space for the rest of the development, stage 2. I think it's a consequence of constraining the size of stage 1, and it then has flow-on effects to open space and also parking.
Okay, so just when I read your report,
Yeah.
and I'm going to that attachment where you've done your art codes assessment, the reason you've given for the proposal not meeting the design principles is removal of trees on stage 2. That's the reason you've given in the report. When I look at the codes and I look at what you can assess the design principles, again, there's a lot more there than just trees. So I guess I'm confused, and I'm asking you the question. You've raised the trees on stage 2 as the reason for saying that the design principles are not being met, but now they will be kept. So did you want to talk about why you still feel those areas don't meet the
Again,
design
I would argue that the site is a constrained site, that stage 1, and that it creates a number of problems, including a reduction in open space and also parking problems. And the provision of open space per se on stage 2, I think, is separate. Is ultimately, yes, it does offset some of the losses there on stage 1, but it's a consequence of trying to have a constrained stage 1 site area.
Okay. All right. It doesn't necessarily answer my question, but I will move on to architectural design. So one of the stated reasons for refusal is that the development is not sympathetic to the desired future character of the mixed-use zone. Where is that desired future character defined in your scheme or your policy?
It's only defined in objective, aims and objective of the scheme. There's further detail in one of our local planning policies, which is our residential design guidelines, which goes into a great deal of detail for each specific precinct.
Okay. And that's not in the RA though. You haven't put in that.
There's probably a technical issue there because the residential design guidelines describe the character and reinforce the character of the precincts in terms of residential. This area is outside a residential zone, it abuts one, and it's in a mixed use zone. So I suppose the Plimpton precinct is included within these. This site is included within the Plimpton precinct officially under the scheme, but the site is in a mixed use zone. Technically the local planning policy doesn't apply. However, this is a residential development. So
I'm just, and I'm pushing you on this because if you get the refusal that you recommended and this ends up somewhere else for review, the question is going to be asked, you've relied as a reason for refusal on the fact that it doesn't meet the desired future character, but there's nothing for this panel to understand what that is. Where is that defined? There's nothing in the document.
I suppose we would go to our local planning strategy where there's a lot of discussion on it as well, and we would be relying on that.
Okay. This is probably going to be one for Malcolm, but you've used the term inwardly focused to describe this development and not in a positive way. So what does that mean? And what would it look like if it wasn't inwardly focused?
I think there was an interpretation of the phrase that I used in my report, which was self-referential. And that's
self-referential. I got inwardly focused confused me. That's why I'm asking.
I suppose I tried to just use another term that I thought might be more of a layperson's term.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
That's okay.
Explanation is.
Okay. And then on page 28 of your report, and I asked the applicant this, you've expressed concerns about shortcomings in livability, flexibility, service placement, waste bin storage, and clarity of access and circulation. What do you mean by flexibility?
I think they were minor points raised in Malcolm's report about the internal design of the apartments. So I think Malcolm did an assessment under the design principles, all 10 of them, and those were very minor points that were raised in each of those areas of his report.
Do you want to talk more about flexibility, or are you happy that it's good?
I haven't been through the RAR in detail, but my take on it, they were relatively minor elements, and that's why they got the oranges rather than the reds. But my take on that they are matters that could be very quickly and easily addressed if the will and the ability was there to actually do it, and therefore there is a degree of flexibility in being able to make those changes.
Okay, thank you. Couple of other things that don't relate to those 4 reasons. You've talked, and I think it came from a comment made by your operations team about an amended, and you've got a draft condition, an amended traffic impact assessment that factors in stage 2. So, and again, I'm going to use the word reasonable. How would it be possible to determine overall traffic impacts of future stages? Because in the paragraph dealing with trees on page 8, you yourself make the statement that stage 2 is uncertain and conceptual. So why would you want the traffic impact assessment to factor in stage 2? And is it even reasonable because it may not be accurate?
Just one moment. We've discussed this with our technical services team, and whilst from a strategic point of view, it would be ideal, we've got a lot of work going on at the moment in the precinct. We're looking at traffic, we're looking at road improvements and trying to pacify traffic in the area. But clearly this development as manageable traffic, the streets have the capacity, it's limited number, so we would be prepared to concede on that.
Okay. I have the last question that doesn't deal with a condition. I have a few questions about conditions for clarifications, but the last question I have is, you talk in the report about the impact of glare of headlights coming out of the basement and the impact on dwellings across the street. So looking at the dwellings that are across the street, it appears to me that the ground floor openings of that dwelling are screened by a boundary fence. There's quite a lot of vegetation. There's some shade sails. So is it really the upper floor openings to that dwelling, that one dwelling, you're concerned about? And could you explain how you think the angle of the headlights coming out of the basement would directly affect upper story or upper floor?
Again, this was recommended by our technical services people as they thought there could be some mitigation of potential problems there. It was raised in a submission. The resident lives directly opposite, very concerned about children's bedrooms and outdoor living spaces and so on. And we felt that that this was an off-site impact that could occur as a result of this development. They're also concerned about noise, and we're just trying to mitigate a potential problem, looking at some flexibility there to try and work through that solution and work through to a solution and try and mitigate that off-site problem. And you know, in the planning framework, I think it's reasonable to try and mitigate against noise and light spill and headlight glare and so on. So that was the reason. It was identified as a potential issue, off-site issue, as a result of the development.
You mentioned noise, and I think it was 7 or 8 vehicles in the morning and 7 or 8 vehicles in the evening. Where would the noise be coming from?
The specific concerns there were the noise in the basement and the entry and exit gates closing and opening, the wheels on concrete and noise. You know, I think there's a device to indicate when vehicles could proceed in one direction and not the other and so on. So it was really raised as an impact concern for residents regarding that the potential for disturbance there.
Would there be a better location for the entry exit?
I think it's just real, well, that's a difficult question to answer, but I think the resident concern was that it would be happening right adjacent to their living and bedroom spaces, and that there was potential for cars having to wait in queue to get in and out. Now, I know it's not a large number, but it's a small busy street and it's difficult for cars to pass and so on. So there possibly would be some very minor delays of cars going in and out and needing to wait for others to come and go. So potential for noise in that regard.
Can I ask about a few conditions now? Assuming we even get to the point where we're prepared to support this, I'd like to just check with you on some of the conditions. I'm wondering about the need for conditions 2, 3, and 4. Isn't that a process that's got to happen anyway?
Yes, it's just belt and braces, I suppose, making sure it does happen in the way that it's been intended to happen, and to acknowledge that the planning framework is bound within the scheme provisions, and that the development controls then will apply to the remainder of the site, and that it's very clear cut what's going to happen and how it's going to happen.
So I'm not contending condition 1, which is the amalgamation, but let's say it's amalgamated into one lot. These are group dwellings, and for now, so what if it's all on one lot? Because they could technically sit on that one parent lot, couldn't they?
I think it has to be amalgamated, I think, in the first instance.
Condition 1 is the amalgamation, but 2, 3, and 4 talk about re-subdivision, and I'm just wondering why you felt that necessary to put that in as conditions on this when it may not be necessary.
So that it reflected the development approval, and so that it was stated that it was going to be the 9 group dwellings as proposed, and that it was a clear development outcome, and that subdivision would occur, and then the remainder of the lot would be subject to the rules of Schedule 13.
Similarly, I wouldn't mind if you could clarify the intent between 5 and 6, conditions 5 and 6. For me, they seem to be unusual conditions. You talked about belts and braces. They certainly look like belts and braces, but I'm wondering about the need for them.
I think, again, it's just so that there's no argument further down the track that additional plot ratio and other development controls in excess of what's already allowed on the site could be applied for, that there's no confusion, there's no doubt as to what plot ratio and what development controls have already been applied to the site, and what's left over in terms of development potential.
So 5 is more of an advice note.
Okay.
There's nothing you're requiring them to do or
No,
to
it could be.
comply with.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, can I talk about conditions 7 and 8? And these relate to the Canning Highway Road widening.
Yes.
So why would you include those conditions on this application when that's actually not impacted by this proposal? Surely that's a stage 2 consideration.
Well, this was referred to Main Roads WA and they requested these conditions be applied. So we've abided by that.
And then condition 9, I just wanted to check with you whether you are aware of recent decisions by the DAP in relation to conditions about section 17 notifications on title, and specifically we received some advice on this, specifically that the onus for actioning placing those notifications on title rests with the local government now and not with the owner, and the condition really only requires the owner to provide consent to those notifications being placed on the title should the local government choose to progress with them. I just wanted to check whether you were aware of that. Okay. The validity period in condition 11, any particular reason why you opted for 2 years when the standard is for 4?
I thought the standard was for 2.
Okay.
So that's my mistake.
Okay. And then you've included condition 15, and that deals with the bathroom windows for unit 9 and 1. You haven't really covered that off as an issue in your RA, and it looks like it's just because it doesn't meet the deemed to comply.
And you know, I did the assessment on that, and there was no justification. And then there was later justification following the addressing of the condition.
Okay, so but then I guess the applicant justifies or not,
It doesn't.
and then the local government
Yeah.
writes a report that comes to this panel that explains why they're taking a certain position. So there's nothing in the report about why you haven't assessed that against the design principles. Is there anything you want to add? You
No,
don't
there's
have
nothing
to.
I want to add.
All right.
It wasn't addressed by the applicant.
Okay. And then condition 24 is the tree requiring the submission of the tree retention and tree protection plan. Do we need an advice note in relation to that condition to state that this condition doesn't necessarily preclude removal of trees for future stages for development? That will be dealt with at the time when future applications are submitted. Because the way that reads now, you're actually imposing a condition on a future development.
Yeah, that would be suitable.
Okay.
Just as a follow-up to that, is that a repeat of, in a way, of condition 21?
I think the difference is that we wanted to make sure the trees were protected as per all of the appropriate standards so that they, you know, weren't in danger of being damaged. And the other one was to make sure that a recognised tree retention plan was actually submitted and that we were happy with the trees that were identified on the plan, that none were left off that should have been on, and the birch trees were included and so on. And the other condition is to make sure that they are actually protected to appropriate standards.
Just a few more, if you'll indulge me. So condition 29 references flashing warning lights near the car park ramp entrance, and I'm just wondering if those, given the scale of the development, are really necessary for a development of this scale, and whether they actually wouldn't have greater impact on the neighbour across the road than the actual headlights that you stated.
I think the applicant suggested they would be put in place so that people would have, if it's a safety precaution, so that people know when a car's approaching in the basement, approaching the exit, someone coming in. I think it was a safety requirement that the applicants determined was necessary to prevent collisions.
Okay.
Might be pedestrians as well, walking down the street too.
Condition 30 doesn't Is that not referencing an action that is required to be undertaken as part of the occupancy certificate process anyway, or is that just belts and braces? Isn't that a process matter that's dealt with as part of the occupancy certificate?
I will,
Technical services,
tech
tech services
yeah. We don't
recommendation.
can't answer why. they
Yeah,
put it on
I'm
there.
sure why.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
And
think you're right, that would occur in the building process.
looking at condition 42, and I might have missed this, so it may well be that I've just missed it because there were a lot of conditions. So condition 42 specifies what should be included in a construction management plan, but it doesn't actually specify that that plan needs to be submitted and approved at any point. Should we include that?
Yes, please.
Oh, sure. Okay, if we get to that point. Condition 44, I'm a bit confused by it. Is it even necessary?
It probably is covered off in the advice notes, but it's one our environmental health officers usually ask us to impose on development applications. So it's potentially covered off in the design advice, advice notes.
Okay. And then final one from me, condition 45 appears to refer to impacts of light, but it refers to condition 44, which refers to noise. I'm a bit confused by that condition. Condition 44.
Again, that was another technical services.
To address this. So, yes, that's
Yeah, I think there might be a numbering issue there.
All good. I think I've taken up enough time. I'm going to hand to member High to see if there are questions. Sorry.
It's all right. I want to go back to the heritage character area. So when I drove in there the other day, under the Stirling Bridge, coming up around, I wouldn't have thought I was in a heritage character area. Had no semblance to me of a heritage character area. Going back up the hill, yes. I want you to explain to me what I've missed and why, when I get under that site, the immediate locality is a heritage character area. Even I've got Stirling Highway staring down at me, I've got Canning Highway, very busy St Peter's Road with residential properties that are almost side on and not heritage, and trade winds hotel.
Fundamentally, because our perception of the character of the place is not driven by standing in one particular spot and looking around. It's actually about moving through the place and understanding the character of it. By way of example, you can't define the character of Subiaco by standing outside the most recent building on Rockaby Road and saying, well, this is now the character of Subiaco. It's not. It's one individual building. It's an aberration. So to contribute to the sense of place, you have to look at the broader place. You can't just look at what's immediately adjacent to the site or on the site itself. So that's, for me, that's kind of the fundamental measure. The analogy I use, and it's one that comes up quite often, is that it's a bit like when someone has a development on a busy road, and their response is, well, it's a dreadful pedestrian environment. No one's going to walk here, so we'll do blank walls and car parks, and you end up with something that's even more hostile than what's there at present. And I'm a great believer that any development, particularly in a place that has a strong emotional connection to the people that live there, should work to increase contribute and enhance and increase the value of the place, not detract from it.
So how is that further impacted by the development of stage one?
Stage one is another another discussion for another day. But
it could impact.
It could, and I think there's a very important discussion to have around that at some point in the future when that one comes before.
No, I'm sorry, could I go on? Just add to the same question. It's a mixed use zone. It could be office, if this was an office building, I would think it's pretty heavily articulated. Yeah, that if councillors made the zoning mixed use, all sorts of uses could be put in. And in that case, if this was an office building, heavily articulated.
Yeah, but I would argue the same, that regardless of the use, whether it's residential, office, medical centre, childcare centre, whatever it might be, there is still an obligation to contribute to the sense of place and to draw inspiration from the place, not to replicate what's there at the moment, but to draw inspiration from it. And I don't believe that this project has done that enough. I reckon it could be easily done. Give me 2 hours and a red pen, and I could fix it. But I'm not part of the adversary.
That's enough.
Yes.
The RAR comments on the elevation of faces down and the concern was that people from Stirling Highway would see this blank wall. But that's quite some distance away. They're travelling at speed. Exactly what is the impact?
Well, the blank wall, I think the blank wall was referred to, I'm not sure if there's something in Malcolm's report that you're referring to, or if you're talking about.
The RAR talks about it.
Yes, yes. The RAR talks about it in respect to a condition regarding graffiti control and removal on it, because it's adjacent to a public cycleway, dual use pathway, which goes from the Plimpton precinct down to the river. It's a very large wall, expansive wall, and main roads, as well as the town, concerned about the finish of it and potential graffitiing of it. So I think that's why it's referred to in the RAR.
But not the view from Stirling Highway.
I didn't think there was a specific
There was a
direction,
reference
but
to
well, in the sense that if it's not treated well in terms of its finish and it's graffitied and so on, that it's not a very pleasant, visually appealing to the site.
Just turning to the conditions, if we end up down that path, is there a list of the plans? You probably should ask. We're now, with the DAP approvals, we're now, as the first condition, listing the plans that are being approved. And I couldn't see a suitable list of the plans. Certainly, I don't think we're in the other.
Do you mean the
plan,
specific plan?
Yes, to be approved.
No, they're listed as a package. The dates scheduled to, sorry, development plans and elevations, dates down received 9th of April, attachment 3.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is referred to in the, as you say, if you were to consider approval, that is referenced in that approval recommendation.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the notifications and the page was mentioned, the way we'll probably head with that if we go down that path. But I was interested in 9C, contaminated sites, and there's been no. So why we include notification, you may or may not find contamination?
That was that has originated from referral to Department of Water and Environmental Regulation, because we knew at the town the site has potential, there's history of records of potential contamination, and need for it to be thoroughly investigated before it could be I think, considered suitable for residential development. So the those notifications and mention of it in, I think, the advice notes is to do with the comments and requested conditions from Department of Water and Environmental
So
Regulation.
you agree with that?
Yes, yes.
The applicant has suggested number of changes to conditions. Have you had a chance to look at those and comment on those?
I think they suggested a change to condition 14, and we feel that's a reasonable condition within the planning framework, and we'd like to ensure that we get the detailed information regarding these materials and finishes, given given the scale of the development. And we just didn't think there was sufficient information, and would be required at building permit stage so that we can actually make sure that it is at that particular standard.
You're quite happy with their suggested changes?
It's
Or not?
no.
Okay.
We feel it would reduce the specificity of the condition and limit the town's ability to verify the final material selections and the quality. So we would like to see it remain as is. There was a reference to condition about graffiti. It's not, I suppose that condition wasn't to create an obligation, but to stress the importance of maintaining the appearance of the building and this section of the building. I suppose it's largely an administrative thing, but its removal doesn't if it was to be removed, it doesn't materially alter the town's ability to seek the applicant to remove or to
So how do you insist
expedite
on
removal.
them removing it within 24 hours?
Well, we would ask them to do so as quickly as
So
possible.
you've got to see it first of all.
Yeah.
So this is within 24 hours of it being put on there.
I suppose it's or my answer to that is it's a standard wording condition that we use at the town for
It's within
development
5 minutes to walk my office.
Yes, but
Correct.
what I'm saying is you
Identifiable.
may not see the graffiti there for 48 hours.
It's true.
Yes,
We have very
receive that.
active residents around the area.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
I think the applicants also made a comment about fence and wall.
Yes.
Look, we don't feel there's a fence. They have provided sufficient articulation or visual interest along this extensive frontage. We wanted to have this condition on so we could secure some refinements to the boundary wall and achieve a more varied pedestrian friendly wall.
Also make them more transparent.
Yes, it is large solid sections of 1.8, I think possibly 2.2 metres high in sections, and it's for the full length of that stretch of Sewell Street, St Peter's Road, apologies. So we thought that was, we didn't feel the current design reflects the outcomes that we like to see for fencing in Plimpton. So we would like that to stay. I think we've already talked about the traffic impact assessment for stage 2.
Yeah. That's it, I think.
Yes, I think that's it.
All right. Okay. In that case, just put this back up. I think we have through Serena a little bit with all those questions. So thank you for your indulgence. I think it's time for us now to move to the report. And the report we have in front of us is recommending refusal of the application for a number of reasons. In order to debate that report or that recommendation, I will need a mover and seconder. Do I have a mover for the recommendation in the town's report?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Moved, Councillor Collinson. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Collinson, as a mover, do you wish to speak to the motion to refuse?
Look, we have discussed this quite sufficiently, and I have listened to what the applicants have been saying, and to some extent it has satisfied quite a bit of my concerns about it. I do think refusal does give more opportunity for the applicants to sort out some of the issues that we have, and to really perhaps come up with a better development. Really, overall. I mean, overall, I mean, I'm not totally opposed to the alternative recommendation, but I think this just gives us opportunity for them to come back with something that would be far more impressive overall. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you. Look, this is a tough one for me. I thought there was a lot to like about this development generally. I think for me, the visitor parking, I think is, for me, a bit of a showstopper. I mean, I know that area well, and I don't think the relying on the public parking on Sewell Street is adequate. And I think I'm less concerned about the overall design of the project. For me, it's on that parking aspect. However, I'm, again, mindful of the conditions in the alternative recommendation. So,
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other member wish to speak for or against the recommendation for refusal? Member Home.
Against. Look, I can't support a refusal at this stage. I know there are some issues, but if I go through the reasons for refusal, I'm told there's no power grant approval. I don't think that is correct. I think there is discretionary powers for us to approve it. It is a mixed-use zone, and as Member Lee has indicated in questions, that it could have been an office building there, it could have been many other things. And I understand Malcolm Mackay's comments about just judge the character of an area by standing in one spot. But this is a pocket which is very different to the rest of the precinct. And I don't think this development is out of character in that particular pocket. As I say, given the context of the immediate area, it sits quite nicely within that area. I do accept that there might be some issues around fencing, side wall, which could be addressed through appropriate conditions. In terms of the visitor parking, again, I understand the problem in the locality, but parking is an issue, but 2 days, I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference. And if it can be, they can be located on the rest of the site, the property, then so be it. And there is a condition in the alternative recommendation that provides for or would allow for some additional parking. And the final reason for refusal is the non-compliance with soft landscaping. I think we need to take the site in as a whole in the context of the total development. I think the open space that will be provided as part of stage 2 adequately compensates for the difference in the soft landscaping. So for those reasons, I can't accept the refusal recommendation.
I believe you.
Yes, I agree with the paper said, and whilst Malcolm's commentary, I agree with a number of details. That isn't enough to refuse this proposal. There are many things in this proposal that are very good. It is a moderate scale. One would think that it should be very palatable to the people in the area. We actually could be much taller. It's at a time when we need housing. It's actually a very good design in most respects. The things about the fence and the walls should be fixed. And as Malcolm said, it's half an hour with a red pen on some of those things. So we can't refuse related to a few things along those lines.
Thank you, Member Lee. Look, I will speak to the motion in front of us. Given the information in the Responsibility Authority report, the information we've received in response to the Reg 13 request that came from the town, and the responses to the many questions today, I will not be comfortable to support the recommendation for refusal, and I do foreshadow that if this motion is lost, I'll move the alternative to approve with some amendments to some of the conditions. In speaking against this motion, I'll briefly cover off each of the 4 key issues raised in the town's recommended reasons for refusal. Firstly, Schedule 1. Look, I think admittedly the process followed in including Schedule 13 or Schedule 113 in the scheme is confusing. And I think the clauses in the schedule are not clear enough in terms of what the additional requirements actually are and what they're trying to achieve. So I do have some sympathy with both the applicants and the town in this regard. One of the reasons for refusal of the application states that this application is incapable of approval, but I don't agree with that. I don't believe that is the case. I do agree that the general discretionary clause 561 of Local Planning Scheme 3 does not apply to the specific site requirements in Schedule 13. But when reading the clauses of Schedule 13 broadly and sensibly and not pedantically, I believe that discretion exists within the criteria of Schedule 13 itself that enables this panel to approve the application. The town's response to the Reg 13 request concedes that upon a secondary review of the plans, it can't be determined conclusively that the proposed building and the associated architectural elements highlighted on the plans provided exceed the building envelope in a height sense. So for me, this removes height as a matter for consideration under Schedule 13 as a reason for refusal. It really only leaves the incursions into the 4-metre setback area as the remaining relevant matter for consideration. And in this respect, the wording of the first exemption clause in Schedule 13, which is number 2, references non-habitable resident amenities such as roof terraces, gardens and shade structures. And in my view, when taking a common sense approach to that wording, inclusion of the words such as suggests that other similar exclusions could be considered provided they suitably integrate with the architecture of the development. I agree with the applicant that the architectural mid-wall elements are actually well integrated with the architectural design and actually add to it. They add visual interest and relief to the front and side facades. There are minor elements that don't project into the setback area as much as the shade structures do that are actually supported by the town. And I think they do add to the design quality and they don't detract from it. Whilst they might not fall within the standard definitions of roof terraces, gardens or shade structures, I am of the view they could easily fall within the exemption if the exemption had been worded to be exhaustive. The other design element which falls within the 4-metre setback area is a planter box or garden area, which in my view falls comfortably within the stated exemptions under Schedule 13. Again, I am of the view that these planter boxes and the associated soft landscaping that will be included in them are well integrated into the building design. They add to the design quality of the development, and I think they provide visual interest and relief as viewed from the street. So for those reasons, I can't accept non-compliance with Schedule 13 as a reason, was a justifiable reason to refuse the application. Visitor parking, I absolutely take on board what the town was saying about the strain placed on visitor parking, but in the absence of a fulsome assessment of the proposal against the design principles of clauses 234 and 235 of the codes, given the town's own acknowledgement there is a surplus of resident parking on this site, a minimum would have been 1 bay per dwelling, given there's good access to public transport. I'm also not comfortable in relying on visitor parking as a reason to refuse the application. But if this motion fails and if we can move to a recommendation for approval, I would like to include a condition to require that the applicant enter into a formal agreement with the town of East Fremantle to provide additional visitor parking to service this development in future stages. I don't usually like placing conditions on approvals that relate to other lots, but given the condition that states that this will all be amalgamated into one lot before this development can proceed, it will be one lot, and therefore I don't think it's unreasonable to require legal agreement or a formal agreement, doesn't have to be legal, to actually ensure that that occurs. If we look at soft landscaping area, again, In the absence of a fulsome design principles assessment and reporting in relation to clause 121 and 122 of the codes, and given that we have now agreed that there will be a condition that requires the trees to be retained on stage 2 at this time, going to mix the high quality of the landscape being proposed and the site's immediate proximity to public open space current in future, I can't support using non-adherence to the deemed to comply standards of the codes or soft landscaping as a justifiable reason to refuse the application. And finally, in relation to design quality and impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area, and I did push this a bit in questions. I don't have any sense of what the agreed future character of this area is. It wasn't in the RA, and it should not be up to us to go and look at local planning strategies and other policies. It just wasn't captured. I can't accept that the proposed design, which I think has been pretty well conceived, drawing on design elements in the vicinity, will have a negative impact on the area. To me, it appears that the reasons for refusal relating to design quality have largely been drawn from the commentary of the single design reviewer engaged by the town. And let me be clear, I'm not questioning the capability and credentials of that individual, who unfortunately had to leave early. I hold them in very high regard. I've worked with them a number of times. But their advice is a single subjective input into the design assessment process, into which there are many inputs. And I'm somewhat concerned about the weight that has been afforded to that feedback received, particularly given the lack of a statutory planning basis for some of those comments or issues that were raised. I don't disagree with some of those points, but again, in my opinion, they're not enough to warrant refusal of the application. So on that basis, I can't support the motion that's on the table to refuse the application. I will now hand back to the mover of the recommendation, Councillor Collins.
Yes, look, well, having listened to it all, I think just because we can approve it doesn't necessarily mean that we should. I certainly don't accept the pocket argument that this is just a little pocket in the whole precinct. We do have to take the precinct in its totality. And this particular site is actually the entrance to the town. Many vehicles, they do enter the town through, there's a bit of a rat run coming up through King Street. And I think the entrance to the town does deserve something better than what we've got in front of us. Taking on Malcolm's comments about the improvements to design, I think that is an important aspect. I know one thing Malcolm didn't mention today, but I know he has mentioned in the past, is the importance of colour. And this to me is very, very beige. And to me, it doesn't really stand out as something which an entrance to the town should have. I think it should be something more bold and a little bit more interesting is what I would require. And I think refusal does give the applicant more opportunity to come up with that. The applicants have addressed some of my concerns, and particularly with the trees and the like, but I'd like to see it a bit more in concrete that it actually will happen rather than just the word here that, yeah, we'll take all this on board, which is what they said. For me, that's not quite enough. And there was also the comment about the visitor parking, how it's only 2 bays. Well, it may only be 2 bays, but in the context of that area, 2 bays is quite important. Many of the properties in that area don't have off-street parking. There's a lot of terrace houses or semi-detached in there, and even the standalone properties. I know quite a few that don't have it, and parking is a huge issue in that area. And I think in town we're constantly being bombarded with complaints about, I can't park anywhere near my house. And residents do have that. And I think that is quite a significant concern that shouldn't just be dismissed. As far as the landscaping, I've heard the comment about the plant. I mean, to me, planter boxes don't really cut it. I would like to have seen a better landscaping design, and I think that is quite possible. So in that sense, refusal doesn't mean we're ruling it out forever. I think it just gives the opportunity for the applicants to take on board some of the comments and to come up with something better that we can comfortably approve.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, on that basis, I will now move to a vote on that motion that's on the table. All those in favour of the refusal? Against? That is carried 3-2. The motion is lost 3-2. I will therefore put an alternate motion on the table. It is contained in the Town of East Fremantle's Responsibility Authority report. I seek to move that alternate to approve, subject to conditions. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Member Hyam. I'm not going to speak in favour necessarily of the approval. I think I've dealt with that as part of my commentary on the previous motion, but what I would like to do as part of talking to this motion is to deal with some of the conditions. So I would like to seek to amend some of those conditions. The first amendment I wish to make is to delete conditions 7 and 8. And they deal with the Canning Road widening, Canning Highway Road widening. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Member Hyam. The reason I'm seeking to delete those conditions, it's not that I don't think the road widening should happen and the seeding and so on, but this is a portion of land that is completely unaffected by Canning Highway. Stage 2, which will come forward in the next stage, will be the mechanism that is appropriate to deal with conditions 7 and 8. So I have no problem with them in the way that they worded. They just don't relate reasonably to this development. So I think they should be deleted. Do you wish to speak a second?
No.
Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? Let's put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Then I would seek to amend conditions 9A, B, and C to align with the standard wording used by the DAP in relation to Section 70 notifications on title, and to add the appropriate advice note as clarification. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Member Hyam. As I outlined in the questioning of the town, we some months ago now, received advice that the onus for actioning Section 70 notifications actually rests with the local government and not with the landowner. So the condition really, any condition imposed should really only relate to landowner consent to that notification being placed on the title should the local government choose to progress with the notifications. And then the advice note just explains that in some more detail. Do you wish to speak?
Only that I would have read the amendment out. I've got a frozen computer.
Okay.
So,
That's all right. Our DAP secretariat, it has got the wording. I guess I've just explained that the key changes. So the Section 70 notification may or may not go on. It's up to the town to decide if it wishes to do that. Does any other member wish to speak for it? All right, let's put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Then I would seek to amend condition 11 to impose a validity period of 4 years instead of 2 years. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Thank you, Member Hyam. Look, a validity period of 4 years is commonly used by most other local governments, and we actually have that included in our DAP regulations. I think a 4-year validity period will ensure the developer has adequate time to finalise detailed design and other development preparation without having to revert to this panel to seek an extension of time. And I think that's important to note. Under the DAP regulations, we can't just agree. It's got to come back to another meeting just to have an extension of time. So the 4 years is a more reasonable period to impose. You wish to speak to the seconder?
no.
Does any other member wish to speak for or against? Right, let's put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. And then I would seek to amend condition 14, not to replace it with the applicant's wording necessarily, but to remove the wording, including a sample board and written confirmation. The condition would then read, prior to the submission of a building permit application, the applicant shall provide final details of the construction materials, colours and finishes, and so on. Do I have a second?
Madam Chair, I'm just wondering if possible to put the additional word in that we had before, which is about should those be changed in time. So
I hear what you're saying. So for clarification on some other conditions that we've used in other meetings, this condition reads, the development shall be constructed to a level of detailing consistent with the elevations and perspectives date stamped that date. We usually add a sentence that says, those materials and colours shall not be amended without the approval of the town of Fremantle. So I'm happy to include that in the amendment. You happy to say? All right. Look, I think the reason behind the amendment is I agree the requirement for a sample board is very specific. We already have plans showing the colours and materials, and between the applicant and the town, they can work out what information is required to reach agreement that those are the final materials. Member Hyam's wording is just to ensure or make it clear that in future, if there's maintenance on these dwellings and there's a slight variation in colour because the paint can't be the same or the material, we don't have to go back through a planning approval process.
So all you're doing is getting rid of the sample board, the rest of it
Yes.
remains the same.
The rest of it's the same, and
Yep.
we're adding a sentence at the end
Yep.
saying that it needs to be in accordance with those details unless otherwise.
Okay.
All right, any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? No? All right, let's vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Then I would seek to amend to delete condition 15, which relates to the bathroom windows. Do I have a second? Thank you, Member Hyatt. Look, the reason I'm moving this is there is no justification in the responsibility or the responsible authority report by the town for the imposition of this condition. There's no analysis against the design principles of the codes. So simply because something doesn't meet the deemed to comply standards is not enough for me to require that change. And I think the applicant has provided significant reasoning why the design has been done the way it is. So I'm happy to delete condition 15. You wish to add?
no,
Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment?
I'm not entirely comfortable with that. So we're still going to get openable windows, are we?
So there are no openable windows on those two sides, and this condition is seeking those windows to be included. The applicant is saying that it has to meet the building code anyway, right, in terms of ventilation and so on. So it's got to meet those requirements. The applicant simply saying the way they've designed the bathrooms, if a condition saying you have to include windows that can open on two sides, it's going to have to require a redesign of those bathrooms, and it'll be a less efficient design internally. So that's
okay.
Any further debate on that amendment? Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I would then like to delete condition 25, which requires a redesign of the front fencing. Do I have a second for that? No? All right, that amendment is lost. I would then like to delete the wording of condition 26 and replace that with a requirement to accommodate 2 visitor bays to service this development in stage 2 of the development. The wording would then be prior to occupation of the development, the applicant shall enter into a formal agreement with the town of East Fremantle the provision of 2 visitor bays in future stages of the development to be fully accessible for this development. Do I have a second?
second.
Thank you, Member Hyatt. Look, the reason I'm saying delete condition 26, I know 26 also references the provision of 18 resident car parking bays, but those are shown on the plans anyway. And there's a condition saying it has to comply with the plan. So I don't think you need to put a condition saying you need 18 resident bays when that's been shown on the plan. So this is really about visitor parking. And as mentioned earlier, I think that to refuse this development on the basis of those 2 bays is probably not reasonable. In the absence of the ability or taking the town's advice to provide them elsewhere in the area, I think it is reasonable to compel the developer by a formal agreement. It doesn't have to be a legal agreement, but they need to come to some sort of formal agreement with the town that when stage 2 comes forward, it needs to accommodate some visitor parking that is fully accessible to this development. And it may well be that that visitor parking, instead of having a bit here and a bit there, there's a consolidated area of visitor parking for the overall precinct. Do you wish to speak?
Only to say that stage 2 might be some time away. And it might have been good to say that those 2 additional bays might be put on the stage 2 land. Whether or not that's possible at this stage.
I was going to suggest that.
Okay. It's.
So
I am happy to, can't involve you in this conversation just at the minute, otherwise I'm going to have to suspend the standing orders. But I'm happy to change the wording to say, prior to occupation of the development, the applicant shall enter into a formal agreement with the town of East Fremantle for the provision of 2 visitor bays in future stages of the development to be fully accessible to this development. Ahead of commencement of the development of stage 2, the applicant shall agree the suitable location for 2 visitor parking bays on the land to be set aside for stage 2. Happy with that?
Yep.
Does any other member wish to speak for or against them? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We're getting there, just a few more. I would then seek to delete condition 30, which really talks about a process. It's not really a plan of position. I have a second for that. Thank you, Member Hyam. The condition describes a standard process which is required to be undertaken as part of the occupancy certificate process anyway. It's covered by separate legislation. The condition is therefore not a valid planning condition and unnecessary. Do you wish to speak to that?
no.
No. Does any other member wish to speak for? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I would then like to delete condition 31, which relates to a revised traffic impact assessment. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Member Hyam. I think this came up in discussion with the town earlier. I don't think it's reasonable to require an amended traffic impact assessment to include the impacts of a future stage 2 when the town itself acknowledges that stage 2 is uncertain and conceptual. Even if the work was done, which will cost money, it's unlikely to be accurate or useful given the uncertainty. So I don't think the condition is fair or reasonable relating to this development proposal. Do you wish to speak?
No, I agree.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against this amendment? Right, let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Then I would like to make a minor amendment to condition 32. I didn't query the town about this, but I would like to make the amendment to require approval of the traffic management plan to the satisfaction of the town upon advice of MRWA and not to the satisfaction of MRWA. Do I have a second? Thank you, Member Hyam. We usually do this with approvals. It's not appropriate to make clearance of a condition the responsibility of a third party. So in clearing this condition, the town will have to seek Main Roads agreement or advice anyway. It's just a minor thing to make the condition more accurate.
Agreed.
All right, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? I would like to amend condition 5 relating to lighting using the wording suggested by the applicant. The condition would then read, prior to the submission of a building permit application, details of all external lighting shall be submitted to the satisfaction of the local government. All lighting shall be designed and installed to minimise light spill onto adjoining properties and comply with the relevant Australian standard as stated. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Look, I think the amended wording that has been put forward aligns with wording of similar conditions recommended by other local governments and imposed by the staff. The current condition as it's drafted requires a technical assessment of vehicle headlight glare. And I'm a bit concerned about that given the configuration of the dwelling across the road. The way that it's currently built, I don't think it's reasonable to require a whole assessment of the headlight glare when it's really a maybe in terms of glare shining through upper floor windows onto ceilings of those rooms. I'm not sure what you would do about that anyway without relocating the whole basement access, which would then put that problem onto another dwelling somewhere else. I just don't think it's reasonable. I think it's more reasonable to apply the standard conditions about external lighting.
I think it covered it very well.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against? Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. And I would like to amend condition 42 to add the following wording at the beginning of the condition. Prior to the issue of a building permit, a construction management plan shall be prepared and submitted to the town of East Fremantle for approval. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor White. The reason being the current condition specifies what the construction management plan should include, but it doesn't actually specify the need for an submission and approval of the plan itself. So that's just a tidy up. Any other members to speak for or against? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. And I would like to delete condition 45. And I'll speak to that if I can see. Thank you. Look, I'm just concerned about a condition that is so specific in terms of what should happen when there's nothing to underpin it in the planning framework. So the operations section of the town has obviously looked at it, and they will no doubt look at it again as the detailed development plans come forward. But I think that this is very open-ended. It's not really a strong planning condition, and it will be difficult to actually impose. So I would seek to delete that. Anyone else wish to speak?
Look, just to add that, as I said before, there aren't that many vehicles coming and going according to the traffic impact information we've received. So it's for quite a limited purpose, and they may not all use it at night time anyway.
Any other member wish to speak for or against? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Lucky last. I would like to add an advice note in relation to condition 24 to state that the condition doesn't preclude removal of trees for future stages and that the merits of any proposed tree retention or removal will be assessed at that time. The advice note shall read as follows. Condition 24 does not mandate the retention of trees outside the stage 1 development site in perpetuity. The merits of retaining or removing trees in future development stages will be considered as part of any formal development application for those lots. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. I think it really just, we don't want unintended consequences where we impose a condition to say no trees can be removed and then in future development stages that causes a challenge. Should we vote on that? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I am done in speaking to the new substantive for the alternate, which is for approval. With the seconder of the motion.
Look, I don't propose to go back through the reasons for supporting this development. I think I spoke enough in the previous motion. I just want to add another amendment, which is to list the plans as condition 1 and renumber all the conditions. So there is some standard wording we now have, which is referencing the plans that are for approval, and then the list of plans will be taken out of attachment 3.
Thank you. I will second that. I don't know. Discuss that?
No.
All right, let's vote on that amendment. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak to this alternate motion? All right, let's put this motion to the vote as amended with the amendments we've just agreed. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Let's revert back to our agenda. Item 4, Form 2 applications. We don't have any for East Fremantle today. Section 31, SAT reconsiderations also nil. Other business, all SAT applications and Supreme Court appeals are listed on our website. With that, I close the meeting at 3:37 p.m. I thank the councillors very much for coming in to the meeting room to join us today. I thank the applicant team for your participation. Thank you to the staff of the town for all your clarification, and thank you very much to the secretary.
Yeah, thanks, Dale.
Thank you.
It was very thorough.